You're listening to A Creative Excuse. This is episode 3 with Ian Kuali'i. Ian is a wonderful man and is an artist that works in cut paper. You'll hear towards the end of the show he's wondering about a fellowship and residency at the School of Advanced Research. Well, he got it. He'll be there in residence from June 14th to August 15th. Also, he'll be doing an exhibition at Echo July 26th through August 24th. A Creative Excuse is presented by Echo Gallery, 830 Canyon Road. We have Carlos Merida's works, Carnival in Mexico, on view till April 14th. Come by and see us. And enjoy this episode with Ian Kuali'i. Yeah, they bought this house like 4 years ago, before they moved here full time, and so that we did it as like a vacation rental for a little while, and then they moved here full time in the fall. So,
where'd they move from?
Houston.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we'll get this.
You're all
close as
Texans?
Possible. Kind of. I wouldn't call myself a Texan,
Right, because
so
you've
much.
spent so much time around in different places, or
Yeah. Well, I was there for 12 years,
Mhm.
so that's enough to like have some Texas in me. But
right.
yeah. But Kara's born and raised there, and Kara's folks were born and raised in Houston. Yeah. So.
Yeah, Texas.
Have you ever been there?
I have. I've spent some time in like Dallas, Fort Worth,
Uh-huh.
Arlington sort of area.
Mm-hmm.
I have a cousin that lives out there, and I was part of a group exhibition that he curated. That must have been like 12 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But short of that, I haven't spent too much time in Texas.
Yeah.
I think it was like 3 weeks.
Yeah. It's maligned in ways that are fair and unfair. You know, it's just like any other place in certain ways, especially in the cities. You know, it's just like any big city.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Houston has a great art scene, a lot of museums and underground stuff and galleries and nonprofits, and it's a very rich community in terms of content and expression,
and also as far as wealth is.
As far as wealth, absolutely. But it's also, they say it's like the most diverse city in America right now.
Oh, really? Even more so than like Newark, New Jersey, or Jersey City?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's pretty amazing to have all the different little communities around the city. You know, you go in and it's like, wow, I feel like I'm in Vietnam. Or
well, that's what I'm saying is like the best Vietnamese food that I've ever had in the United States of America was in Dallas.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it was like in Texas. I was like, okay.
Yeah. And I haven't spent much time in Dallas.
Right. And then when I asked the question, like why that was, apparently a lot of the political refugees ended up in Texas.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Vietnam especially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Great Vietnamese food in Houston. But yeah, it's a strange state. And people like on both sides of the political spectrum are like super proud of Texas.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I guess it's like that independent streak, you know.
Well, it's also that like very much larger than life like attitude, you know, like if you're about something politically, you're probably like extra large and puffed up about that, you know, stance. So
yeah. And it's funny like that the capital city is probably the most liberal city in Texas.
What is the capital city? Austin?
Yeah.
Yeah, true. I didn't know that Austin was the capital city.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably, you know, you could ask me what the capital city of another place is and probably just wouldn't even.
Hawaii.
It used to be, it was Lahaina, then Wailuku, and then Honolulu.
Okay.
But, you know, that's only because of, you know, my, yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this with me.
Of course.
You have always been so supportive of me and what I do. It's really appreciated. I think one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is just how sometimes I myself will sometimes hold back in terms of like giving somebody praise or like love and things like that. And it's like, I don't know, why do I do that? You know, this fear that comes in. Like the other day, I was driving down, and there was a homeless dude at the median, you know, asking for money. And in my head, I didn't have any money at the time, but in my head, I was like, well, why don't you just roll down the window and say, hey, man, I see you. I'm rooting for you.
Right.
And I didn't say it. You know, I was like, why didn't I say that? You know what I mean? But anyway, that's just a way to say, like, I really appreciate your reaching out to me and being supportive of what I do.
Yeah,
it means a lot.
Completely mutual, you know? Yeah. And I apologize about the other day when we went to the exhibition at Iconic.
Oh.
And you were mid-conversation with the lady who does work with the Folk Art Museum.
Oh, yeah.
I forget her name.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
But we were on our way out, and you were mid-conversation, so I didn't want to interrupt that.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. Well, I appreciate you coming.
Right.
And that you show up to the things that I do. I think that's great.
Of course. Well, I mean, you know, we should be showing up for each other. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
I don't know, my opinion. Maybe other people. I don't know. I know that some people lack in like certain social graces or have anxiety issues that keep them from going out and, you know, even the basic, you know, forms of verbal expression when it comes to, you know, appreciation. You know?
Sure.
I mean, I struggle with that myself sometimes.
Yeah. It's something that I'm learning a lot right now. I, you know, spent so much time doing like just the work, you know, a little bit more isolated in how I work. And now I'm finding like, I get a lot of value and also realize that I need to give, like that there's like a need to give. It's not just like, oh, it's the right thing to do, or like there's a certain, it's funny because I feel like there's a certain selfishness in it.
Oh, totally.
Because it's like, wow, there's this thing within me that's like, oh, I really have a need to give to people. And maybe that's another aspect of like this withholding that can sometimes happen, you know, like, I don't know, out of embarrassment or fear of being rejected or something. I don't know.
I think a majority of like it comes from like personally like a fear of rejection for me.
Yeah.
And I think also because of experience, like giving so much, and then it leaves you open to even the takers, you know, the people that just come in and just want to harvest your energy.
Yeah.
And it's not like I don't have enough energy to give, you know, but it's super taxing and draining. You know, I have conversations with Ginger about this sort of thing all the time. You know,
right.
She's in the same sort of like realm, you know, constantly giving, helping, you know, being that individual. So.
Yeah, it's something that I think we have to be conscious of at the same time, right? Like honor the fact that we have that need and go there, but also recognize when we're being taken advantage of too, you know?
Right.
And being really discriminate, right? Like kind of holding that well of energy and being like, okay, I can let it out with this one right here.
But also not allowing, you know, the experience of like takers to like set up too thick of walls or barriers, you know, where you don't want to, like you feel way too cautious to give, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, like I don't really have that problem. I'll go back and just continue to give regardless of what I'm going through in life. But I know individuals that are just like, no, that's it. Like I'm putting up these walls. I'm going and doing self-care, but the self-care ends up being like self-indulgence or super selfish. So they no longer actually, you know, give back, you know, they're just giving to self. And then, you know, and for me, like, I don't want to fall into those sorts of traps of somebody, with their experiences. I mean, who knows, like maybe these individuals that are takers, you know, if I sat down with them and actually had a conversation with them of why they do this with energy, you know, maybe we could heal together, you know, maybe we could help each other through these
You probably have to come at it sideways though.
Oh, of course.
You know,
always.
Because it's like, if you say that, they're like, I don't do that.
I mean, I recently, I won't say any names, I recently ran into an issue where I felt like I was being taken advantage of, and I expressed it to this individual.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I asked him, I'm like, are we even still friends? Like, what's the deal here? Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
And, you know, like nothing. Like there was no conversation because of that. So I have to wait and be patient to see exactly where they are on their terms, you know, and like you said, come at it from like a different angle.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's a trip being alive.
Isn't it? Humans, we are such complicated but simple creatures.
I know. It's funny. I mean, and this podcast for me too has been a way of like reaching out to people that I know I want to talk to more and get to know better. but just don't often carve out enough time or space to do that. People that I might see at an opening or something, but it's just a little chit chat and hello, goodbye,
Right.
And my mind sometimes needs this like construction to like be like, oh, I'm doing something productive,
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I also think this is a good like sort of safe place for like the energy too, because you in a weird way get to you have the opportunity to sort of like vet the individuals, or like, you know what I mean? Like, like okay, this is an energy that I've been interacting with like on maybe on a minimal level, and it's comfortable and safe to like sit with them and have these conversations about things, opposed to like just completely opening yourself up and not protecting your energies.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, it's fun. So we first worked together at Broken Boxes, the show that Ginger and Chanupa curated. They curated. They were holding churros at the time, and they were curating. They curated the Broken Boxes at Form of Concept,
right? And
you had a piece there, which when I saw was like, to me, was one of the standouts of the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. Paper as a medium is something that like isn't, I think, well known or explored. It's just not a medium that people are, it's in their consciousness as much.
Right. I think a majority of individuals, when they see what I do, they think of just like doilies, or like I'm a craft individual. I like fit within the craft box. It's Valentine's Day tomorrow. Like, they're probably expecting me to do like a bunch of cutout hearts, which I'm actually doing one for my daughter currently. But yes,
snowflakes in the winter.
It's totally snowflakes in the winter, which yes, I think we've all done, and I think that's what it is. Like, people, they automatically attach like hand cut paper, or whatever name you want to use to like talk about the craft. Yeah, and it's automatically put in that craft category. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, you're crafting, like you're doing paper snowflakes for your Christmas tree, or It
reminds me of like polymer clay. Like, that's a medium that most people don't take seriously at all, because they associate it with like, I'm gonna make Sculpey beads and put them in the oven.
Right.
And there's people that are using that medium in just really amazing ways.
Right. I know individuals that work in like ceramics or clay, but they'll go and buy like the instant Sculpey that you can like put in your oven, and they'll use that for things.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, and I mean, exactly. I mean, some of the things that they're doing with it are mind blowing. Who was it? Like Brian Fleetwood, like using like that plastic tool dipping material, or like all these other like awkward sort of things like that. That's impressive to me. Yes, yeah. Like somebody completely thinking out of like the normal, like scope of what art materials are, or like what people consider archival or appropriate for like fine arts or contemporary arts, right? It's I love that.
So, I mean, your main tool is blade and paper.
Blade and paper, definitely.
And what struck me I don't think I've ever watched you work, but I did look at some of the videos that are online. And what struck me was the way it almost felt like you were using the razor as a brush, like the way you were using it in certain ways, not in the small strokes, but in the big strokes. Right. You were so free with the way you were using it.
Right. I think like individuals kind of trip out when I cut paper, and other cut paper artists, because they are so technically focused, where I feel there's this there has to be, for me, like this kind of loose gestural approach to things, like a very freeing like way of going about things.
Right.
But then I also have to go back to that very like rigid, almost mechanical, robot way of approaching like the other segments of a piece. And then I usually, like the paper will usually be in front of like a panel of, mixed media work. So that's like the super freeing process for me too, because I know that as soon as I get into the tedious like portion of the cut paper, like I'm gonna drive myself completely insane. Or I go right into this like meditative state where like I completely lose time and I'm just focused solely on the cut paper process, like all that technical stuff. But that there has to be that balance between that free, like flowing sort of approach to things, just like letting things go and letting things happen, because I'm going right back to that other portion of it,
right.
process of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you came at it through stencils for graffiti, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I went from doing like illegal graffiti on the streets to simplifying the process through stencil, and then from stenciling, basically just really liking the cut process and not using the stencil to actually spray. So I started figuring out ways to develop like the cut approach using different bridges, so it didn't look like your typical sort of stencil, and then also like with the cut paper, like it didn't look like your typical like pepe picado or like ancient Chinese like cut paper techniques or anything from like Southeast Asia. I wanted to do something that was like unique and would kind of like separate myself from, and at the same time, like again, like with the freeing like very loose approach and then the very like tight and technical approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever do the art school thing?
No, never did the art school thing.
Yeah.
I basically decided that if I was going to be an artist, that I would produce the art. And that if I needed to learn, if I felt this need to learn, which I did, I would go seek out mentors.
Nice.
And people that I considered masters of like certain techniques. And so, yeah, throughout my life, I've had a few individuals like come into my life. For graffiti, I had this old school graffiti writer from Baltimore, Maryland, named Clarence Robb, and he wrote the name Kuba. And he was one of the original guy who brought like East Coast style of graffiti to the San Francisco Bay Area. And he was like the first person to paint this like extremely famous place in the Tenderloin called Psycho City. And just kind of like started blossoming from there, like the graffiti movement. It was all like punk rock skater kids and Barry McGee. I don't know if you know Barry McGee's work. He goes by Twit. Yeah, so Barry McGee is actually part of that family as well. So like apparently Barry McGee's first graffiti name was Nicaragua because Cuba used to like write in the bathroom stalls at all these punk shows in San Francisco. And like one day he came in and he saw like a fresh Nicaragua tag. And so there's like this weird sort of like family history with all that. That's funny. Yeah, but that's where it kind of blossomed from. There was 3 people technically in the San Francisco Bay Area. It was my mentor Cuba, this other guy named UB40, and a guy that was born and raised in San Francisco that went by the name Riff. And they were like the 3 people that were sort of like the pioneers of Bay Area graffiti. Some homegrown that had very like Chicano approach, some that were just like very raw punk rock, and then Cuba, who was like in the middle of like the New York style graffiti, East Coast, and then all of that sort of just became this hybrid style in the Bay that created like the Mission style. So like the Margaret Kilgallons and Barry McGee's and
Is that when you were first starting out?
When I first started out, actually, graffiti for me started in like the early, I don't know, I'm like aging myself. I started doing graffiti early on in like the 80s because of the Southern California revival of like the hip hop movement. And so I was already breakdancing, and then graffiti, like there was already like the gang graffiti, like a Chicano, like, graffiti as well.
Were those pretty linked up, the kind of dancing and the graffiti and just
at that point
it was cultural scene?
Yeah, in Southern California it was a super interesting sort of crossover between skateboarding culture, even portions of surf culture, because skateboarding culture came from surfing culture, and then like the gangs in Southern California, and a lot of the gang members actually listened to hip hop because hip hop would sample or electronic music. The early electro music would like use drum samples, or like 808s were like constantly in different things, so that it was easy for them to kind of like latch on to those things. And then like the dance parties anyway, like I would go to my best friend Aaron Alvarado's house, like father's house, Sharky. He was like the veterano like gang member from our neighborhood. And he would have these huge family parties, and it would be like all his cousins, and they'd be like listening to oldies, and they'd be dancing, and so like that whole dance party thing kind of like just trickled over once hip hop came and like became a thing in like Southern California. And along with that was like they were already doing graffiti writing had existed and predates like, I don't know, like the New York style of graffiti by like multiple decades.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, especially in Southern California and predominantly Central American neighborhoods.
Was it predominantly like a sort of turf thing, or was it like for just to express artistically?
I think it was more so like turf. And as you know too, like muralism in those communities has always been like a major thing as well.
Right.
So like they would immediately gravitate to walls to paint anyway, and then it just started like snowballing and techniques started to develop, once the New York style graffiti started coming into play, or like East Coast style, I should say, because it's debatable if it's New York style or Philadelphia style or Maryland.
Kind of influence each other.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was that, and then my other mentor was this gentleman named Doze Green, who he is part of like the pioneering hip hop cultural movement, and he was a subway graffiti writer, dancer, designer. So he was a graphic designer. He designed like the Bad Boys Club logo and like things like that I never knew that he designed. He was, oh yeah, I designed that. Like Ice-T's album cover for Iceberg, like just crazy things. And he's a super successful like urban contemporary artist as well. Because he comes from that sort of foundation of the early generations of individuals to make that transition,
Yeah.
And also like traveled the globe because of hip hop before he was like in his mid-teens, he'd already been around the globe.
Yeah.
So
what kind of things do you feel like that you learned from those folks that still you carry with you and comes into your work now?
Form and structure, definitely. Certain things about color theory. You can't have somebody that's that has a serious background in graffiti writing and not get schooled in color theory. It's like that's what they do. They're like at night painting at nighttime even, having to know exactly what colors are in your cans and then like knowing your colors and how they interact and play with each other in dark settings. So not that I go out and do that, but color theory, form, structure, different brush like techniques that I learned from like Doze, not to be so rigid with my approach as well, like that it's okay to be loose and free with my approach, and that if I feel that things need to be painted over or tightened up later on with like my background panels, so be it, or just let it live, like those things aren't too precious, and as a matter of fact, like the art isn't, it's precious, but it isn't that precious,
Yeah.
So
it's funny because one of the things you said in the videos was about the permanence of a cut.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, when you're working with cut paper.
When you're working with cut paper, but that's what it goes back to, right? Yeah. So it's like that weird balance between there's a very I think I always the word I always go back to is like unapologetic approach to like certain things. So like you could be completely unapologetic with a brush stroke or an ink stroke or like layering things, and then you can go back later on and tighten things up as you feel fit. With cut paper, it's super unforgiving, right? Like you can't erase it,
right?
You can't go paint over it, you know. So you have to, and again, that's where like driving myself mad, right? Like being loose and free with a certain level of it, and then because I know I'm going to have to go into that extremely maddening,
because there's a lot of patterning,
veiled words as well, like even the portraiture elements. Like if I mess up on an eyeball, I mess up on an eyeball. I have to like either scrap the whole thing or figure out another way to kind of
turn it into an eye patch.
Oh, totally. Like just completely remove it really quick. So. Yeah, and then as far as like other mentors are concerned, like my mother, obviously, she's like the ultimate of all mentors.
I was lucky to meet her in Santa Fe. She seems like such an amazing woman.
She'll be back actually. Her and Ginger are working on a project now, which I had the vision of during the Broken Boxes exhibition. So it's been like 2 years coming.
Is that the tattoo thing?
The tattoo symposium. Nice. Yeah, so they're working on the last bit of funding now.
Cool.
Which I'm excited about, which I also wanted to talk to you about, because if Keone Nunez, who does all of our cultural work, is in town, maybe we could do something where I get tattooed in the space.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And so people can come and like kind of just experience that, and it'll be like a performative thing, and maybe I could document it, or just document the sound, you know. And
are you looking at August for that?
Yeah.
Oh, a little alignment there.
I know, right? So it's like this kind of like weird thing where I feel like that whole talk of solo exhibition in the new space, and since it will run, I guess, into a portion of market, do a series of collaborative works with different contemporary Indigenous artists as well. So like maybe do a handful of like kind of 3-dimensional sculptural pieces that are mixed media with different individuals. Maybe, I don't know, hopefully I can get 12 people to agree to it.
Yeah.
You know, so that way that shelf that you were talking about can be occupied, and then that one wall can be done or whatever. I mean, these are things that we could discuss later.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, because it's such an intense time and there's so many people in town and it's so festive, like, let's just rock it. I mean, let's just use the whole space, you know, in whatever ways inspire you, you know. I'm totally comfortable like looking at like how, you know, using the entirety of the space in some way. So we can talk about that for sure.
Right. And then also, you know, like back to like Keone, like I think it would be great to charge the space, especially since like this will be the first time in Santa Fe during any sort of festival or whatever that an Indigenous tattoo, anything has taken place. Anything, you know.
Yeah.
And so I see it as like this beautiful right moment to, you know, kind of pull people in with that. But back to mentors, my mom.
Yeah, your mom.
My mom. Yeah, she's incredible. Like, yeah, I mean, you'll hopefully, if she's not too busy, well, I mean, she'll definitely come and check out the show. So, you know, right?
One would hope.
Well, I mean, I know, right? Mom's in town. She's probably going to be sleeping like on my bed. I'll be sleeping on the couch, and then, you know, yeah, like if she doesn't show up to my exhibition, then I must have done something wrong. But yeah, she's incredible. She's done like cultural work for multiple decades. She's helped set up educational programs for prevention, like HIV/AIDS and hepatitis on reservations, and she continues to do that work. She's also an art consultant, so and helps out with cultural protocol for different museums in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, take for instance, like if the DeYoung Museum is doing. Like she helped with the Royal Featherwork exhibition at the DeYoung, which ended up going to LACMA in LA afterward. But they needed to do, because we consider those living cultural objects that belong to us or belong to our people, and to honor the people of the land in which these objects are coming to, living objects. She needed to reach out to like Ohlone elders and other people, you know, to sort of ask permission and, you know, see what the approach was as far as like them coming in and chanting or, you know, doing whatever they needed to do on their side. So that's what she kind of gets pulled into. And that's sort of her role across the board. Yeah, I mean, she's sort of one of those weird unsung individuals. Like you have a lot of, you know, huge names within like the Indigenous movement, but she always just decides to kind of stay under the radar and just get the work done, you know? Yeah.
I can relate to that.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I tend to hide behind artists, you know, as a presenter, you know, I'm kind of trying my best to stay in the background, you know, one, because I think it's more important to hear what the artist has to say, but there's also, I think, like, a level of shyness that I sometimes don't want to acknowledge. You know, it's like, I'll just stay in the background. Don't look at me.
Yeah, I mean, I could be loud and obnoxious and, you know, in the center of attention, but most of the time I find it's better for me to just kind of bob and weave in and out of energies again. You know, it feels safer to me. Yeah.
Were you around art a lot as a kid, or?
My father was a photographer, a folk singer, and a playhouse actor. He's won awards for his playhouse acting in Southern California.
Great.
And
what's his name?
Robert Brent Hardwick. But when he got back from Vietnam, he focused on photography, and I think he was an award-winning photographer. But I know that he was like published a bunch in like Time Life magazine or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah.
So you were around that energy,
right? And he was also the official photographer of Yippee Day, the day that the hippies took over Disneyland.
Oh.
Yeah. And he did a lot of photography for the Fondas and Warren Beatty during the Civil Rights Movement. Mm-hmm. So he had all these amazing photographs in our garage growing up. And then I remember we would sit down and he would show us like negatives and show us actual prints. And one day, I don't know what happened, but the garages went up in flame. And all of his photography was like lost.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was intense. I mean, he had photos of like Angela Davis in the courtroom, like during the whole trial. He had like Manson family photos. He had like all sorts of like photos during like the whole Black Panther like party movement. He organized a strike at a chemical factory that he worked at in Santa Fe Springs, California, and like we were on the line with what's his name? See, I'm drawing a blank now, but yeah. You know, extremely famous farm worker.
Cesar Chavez?
Yeah, Cesar Chavez.
Yeah.
See, like, Anyway, that guy.
Right.
You know, that iconic individual whose name I can't even remember.
It's okay.
So it was, I was always surrounded by that sort of energy and the arts as well.
Yeah.
And then my mother, while she didn't necessarily like art as we know it, like the art of motherhood.
Yeah, sure.
Like master of the craft, but she is super connected to a lot of individuals that are, you know, incredible as far as like traditional arts are concerned. Whatever, I don't know. I struggle with the term traditional arts, but
sure.
Traditional arts and contemporary art as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like she knows a lot of incredible individuals. So.
Well, I think a lot about just the creative spirit in general. And, you know, I think individuals like you or I are blessed / cursed with this like need to like put stuff out there, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that gets expressed through artwork, but it gets expressed through a lot of other ways too, you know? And it's like, there's just this sort of well of energy that like needs to get out, you know? And so I think about that as just, you know, raw creativity, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm not in, like closing myself off indoors, you know, to create, I'm probably outdoors, like doing something earthworks related, you know, like doing something, even if it's just like some sort of random bundle that I'm creating and putting somewhere that nobody will ever see, you know, where it's just that idea of, land as audience, you know, or like just paying that sort of respect. I think that kind of creative, like raw creative energy, is, I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at, you know? And I haven't been spending a lot of time indoors creating. I do commissions here and there for people. Most of the time I turn down opportunities just because of, you know, like where I'm at right now in life and like this transition. But I always have to figure out some way to be creative, you know?
Do you think that's something that's accessible to everybody? That creative energy?
I do. Yeah. I do. I mean, I think we approach it all differently. I know that if I'm extremely depressed, I'm paralyzed. Like a lot of individuals when they're depressed, they can take that energy and transform it and then be very much creative, you know, and produce like insane like amounts of work. I can't. I have to like step back, take my time, listen to music, complicate my brain with other things, you know, so I'm not thinking too much and dwelling on the things that are depressing me. But yeah, I mean, it's totally accessible to everybody. We just all approach it, I believe, in a different way.
Right. Yeah, I think about art making as like the practice of like using that energy and like refining it and getting clear about it and like and shaping it. It's like you know, and then the object is just sort of this artifact. It's an art, right? It's an artifact of that process of manifesting your creative energy. You know.
Yeah, I mean, something out of nothing is, you know, it's a beautiful thing. You know? But
yet
I think
in a certain way it was already there.
right, of course,
Right?
you know, yeah. It's just, you know, making it like tangible, right? Yeah. It's always existed. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that everybody has, just not everybody is tapped into.
Yeah.
And if you know, if we all tap into it in different ways,
Right.
that's just it, you know.
Right.
For like, you know, some, it's like fun videos, right? Like the ones that you and Kara like.
Yeah. Right.
And then you know, or curation, or I don't know, like cooking, you know, even cleaning, or, you know, interior decorating. Like we all kind of approach it from a different way. And then we all kind of like fill necessary spaces, right, to keep this whole thing that we call life moving, you know. And even all the bad, you know, it's necessary.
Well, I mean, that's creation too.
Right.
Right. Like creation doesn't necessarily mean good.
Right.
You know, it's like we're always putting something out into the world. You know, it could be mechanical, could be free, could be like, you know, malignant. It could be helpful, you know, but it's, I think that's one thing that I try to remember, is that every moment's an opportunity to create something, you know, even if it's just like presence, you know,
right,
just like being present right now, or smiling at somebody. Like it can be simple, the most simplest thing, you know. But that's again, that's the practice, right? Of like taking that creative energy and manifesting it, for me, consciously. You know, what do I want to create?
Yeah, I mean, radiant kindness is a beautiful thing, but I'll never discount like the pain and suffering that individuals like feel. Like those are all valid things as well.
Yeah.
And you know, from pain and suffering, a lot of the subcultures that sort of inform my process, you know, they were born out of that, you know. So I could never, like, those pains and those struggles are very much so important.
Yeah.
Just as important as radiant kindness. You know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Like I wonder about, like, you know, what's gonna come out of, you know, the current U.S. political administration.
They're listening.
He who shall not be named. You know, like how that can sometimes elicit things that just didn't have that spark quite yet. You know. And when you see what's at stake more clearly, or like what's being lost, there can be like, oh fuck, no, that's not right. I don't want that, you know. And it can elicit that kind of response, you know.
Right. I mean, like currently, like just seeing this rise in like more of a matriarchal approach. You know what I mean? I don't think that would have ever happened.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not that it never would have happened, because it happens in a lot of different communities already.
Sure.
But I think what's happening right now, it was definitely, there was like definitely a sense of urgency and spark to like push super heavy now, you know, because of what's happening. People are like fed up, you know?
Yeah.
So
thank you, Donald? Question mark?
I mean, in a weird way,
You know?
in a weird way, yes.
Yeah.
You know, if things change for the better, then yeah, definitely like thank you, Donald, for, you know, like shining light on the truth that like a lot of things are extremely fucked up. You know what I mean? And we've turned, you know, a blind eye to it for like way too long. You know. Yeah, I thought we weren't going to say his name either.
Turn the lights on.
Donald Duck. Donald,
we're talking about ducks here.
Donald Duck.
You know.
Yeah, you know, like it's going to be interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, life is interesting to begin with. You know? So
It's a big pendulum, isn't it? Just
it
kind of
is.
like
It is.
seeing the extremes go back and forth.
That balance again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that interests me, you had this experience. I think it ties into balance, actually. So you had an experience of residency with Red Bull.
I did.
Right. So one of the things I think is interesting is, you know, just the balance of like how to make a living as an artist, right? And you have like, you know, a corporation, you know, wanting to work with you as an artist,
Who is literally like that are literally liquid asset, literally liquid asset. You know,
That's
so
funny.
yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You know, how was that for you? What was that process like?
The experience was like, for lack of a better word, like incredible.
Yeah.
Detroit has to be like, it's definitely one of my favorite cities in the United States of America, or so-called U.S. They really do hustle harder than any other city I've ever been to. And their community is super close and tight knit. So the creative community, whether it's music, dance, sculpture, found object, it doesn't matter. Like, doesn't matter what it is. They all come out and support in like full force. Awesome. And it's very much like a youth or young adult driven community as well at this point. There's a lot of hardship as well, like, you know, as we all know. And if you don't know, then you should do your research on Detroit hardship. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the corporation like side of it, I'm happy that they're putting their money in these like realms.
Right.
It was super nice. Like they at that point it was a 3-month residency. It paid $16,000. They housed you. They basically fed us. There was a separate budget for our frames. We got to meet all these incredible people. I ended up donating like a piece to the museum there, to MOCAD, for their annual auction, to raise funds for the museum. So I got to meet all these like wonderful people in the creative community there. It's a massive city. I like to go when I go places. I like to explore on my own. I basically they had 3 bicycles for like, you know, the 3 different artists that were staying there, and I went on a 26-mile bike ride by myself, just trying to get the lay of the land, and it was wonderful. I mean, I don't know, I can't say anything terrible about that experience at all.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting how, like, because it sounds like they were super supportive of you as an individual,
right?
You know, even though, you know, it's part of, I mean, for them it's a marketing thing, right? They want to support their product,
right?
And so I think it's interesting when a company like that will, you know, stay open to, you know, like, you do your work, and, you know, that's enough.
I think that in general, Red Bull is extremely, while I don't agree necessarily with a lot of their political choices and, you know, choices when it comes to environment in general.
Yeah. What's in that drink?
I know, right?
It's like some kind of weird natural cocaine.
Well, I mean, they did have cocaine when they did the Red Bull Cola for a bit. And they had to pull it from the shelves. It actually had coca leaf extract in it. Anyway.
It did already?
I know, right? While I don't necessarily agree with all of their, you know, all of their practices, I do appreciate that they allow all of the creative individuals, whether it's sports, video, whatever, they allow us pretty much full creative control. They don't try to like stifle us at all, you know, or tell us how to do our, you know, our thing.
Do you put a Red Bull can in that picture?
Basically, you know, maybe it's just like some weird product placement or something, you know. Like, yeah, there's like one photo of me, I think, and I was drinking like the tropical Red Bull or something, and like, I don't know, the photographer was like, "Can you turn the label of the can to like face?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" I already got it in my head, right. You know what I mean? Right. So yeah, turn that a bit. But short of that, they weren't telling me what I can't do. What I shouldn't do. As a matter of fact, in the studio space, which I think pissed off a couple of like one of the other artists. He has since said it hasn't pissed him off. I set up like a little archery range. And like, so I was shooting arrows in the studio space, and people could have been hit by arrows, but you know, they were just like, no, it's fine, have fun, do your thing. You know what I mean? If this is helping you out creatively, like, set up an archery range. I was just unfortunately like all in my friend Michael Reeder's like painting space. So he'd be like mid brushstroke and I'd be drawing back on like the bow right by his head, you know. In hindsight, it was kind of a prick move to do. But I'm not too proud to apologize when I know I'm wrong.
That's interesting.
Red Bull though, they're continuing. I mean, they still have the residency program, but I believe it has been swallowed up into one major arts. I think it's just called Red Bull Arts now. So it's no longer just like Red Bull House of Art Detroit,
Yeah.
or Red Bull Arts New York. It's become like one major thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting just like how tied into, capitalism, art is now.
Oh, totally.
And, it's like...
But I mean, it has been though. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
no, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's something that a lot of artists think about is to how to like decouple. Like how do we make a living, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we make money in this society and still make art?
Chinupa is one of my favorite people to talk
Yeah.
to about this sort of thing.
He's a great example.
Oh, great example. He'll go out and do artist talks, to make the money, but maybe not exhibit or sell as much work as he he could.
Yeah.
I mean, he could sell out a show immediately,
Yeah.
but he chooses not to. And in his mind, there was this conversation of being able to like reset everything. Like, how do we go back to like zero and restructure things so it's not so much art as commodity. You know what I mean? It's a touchy thing because we all need to eat and we all need to survive. Right. I'd like to be able to make enough money to buy back a bunch of ancestral land, which is something you and I have talked about.
Yeah.
And if I was able to buy like 100 acres of land, I would, try to put a portion of it into trust for our people. So like my homeless people could, so those are like the good things that we could do.
Right.
And kind of like resetting like maybe a certain idea of how we approach art as commodity, right? I don't know, maybe I know some people have a problem with taking money from like huge financial institutions for doing corporate art or something, right?
Sure.
Where I see it on the other way around, it's if the practice is harmful and the money that exists there is harmful, if I can get that money, then that's less money that's going out and doing harm.
That's right.
I can transform that money into something positive for communities, right?
Right.
And not just strictly for myself. Like, hey, I just sold a piece for $120,000 to, like Bank of America or something, right?
Yeah.
But that $120,000 could be put to something beautiful to,
right.
start something else.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really, one of the ways that it can work, so it's like if I feel weird about, I don't know, Target, for example, has a great art collection, and if they're supporting art, great, I actually don't know anything about their employment practices, so I guess I probably shouldn't use them as an example, but I don't know, like Walmart or something, if I can take $50,000 of their money and do something positive with it, then wonderful.
Right. Well, it's my understanding that the Waltons are actually the massive funders of like Crystal Bridges, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So, they just did that. They're doing that traveling exhibition, which is at Mokna right now.
That's right. Yeah.
Focusing on contemporary Indigenous art from like, origin to, where we are now.
Yeah.
All funded by the Waltons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like,
it's complex.
People
are complex.
We are weird, complex, but simple creatures.
And yet, I know I have a tendency to flatten people out, right? Based on sometimes even a single experience. I'll have a negative experience with somebody and I'm like, oh, that person's an asshole. But like maybe if I spent a little bit more time with them and be like, oh, actually, they were just having a really shitty day and taking it out on me. Which that wasn't cool, but that's not who they are.
Right.
And I think it's important to recognize like that we have the capacity to to change and to be more than what we might see in a single instance.
Right. Dressed like the Hamburglar.
That's right.
Dressed like the Hamburglar.
Yeah. If you can't see this right now, but looks like he should be stealing hamburgers from Ronald McDonald's.
The things that I was having this conversation actually the other night with friend Felicia, and we were like trying to figure out where does this whole like idea of the black and white striped prison shirt come into play? It's like you're the bank robber. Is it like, I don't know. It was just I don't know. Weird, right? Anyway.
That's funny.
Prison break, and then immediately like they break out of prison, and so they're like robbing banks because they want to go back to prison. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Let's just dress for the part.
Yeah. Exactly. We're already going back in. So.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a. McDonald's. There we go. It's a weird thing. because I mean, again, like I don't mind like if the Waltons, who are the crazy billionaire family they are, want to invest in the arts, and we're able to sit down with them and have conversation, where other individuals will never have like the opportunity to sit down with them and have conversation and maybe help alter certain things, or like who knows, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, then yeah, so be it.
Yeah.
So
And you'd probably find they're probably kind people.
Well, I heard that, because I do have a friend that went down to visit with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that they actually, you would think that they would like have like a chauffeur come and pick them up at the airport in like a expensive Mercedes or something.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently they came and picked them up from the airport
Yeah.
in like their top of the line Hyundai.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a Hyundai.
Yeah.
They probably, I mean, I joke around, I'm like, they probably had like $5 million in cash in the trunk of the car just because they can. And they're like, I'm just going to roll around in my
Never
Hyundai.
know when you're going to need $5 million.
Well, I mean, it's like one of those things, right? Like, they're like, we could just roll around with $5 million in the trunk and, nobody would ever know or something.
Yeah.
In our Hyundai.
That's funny.
Leave it parked somewhere. Yeah, it's, but, I would expect them to be like Bentley'd up and, not investing in art. But then that's my own sort of, my own bias, right? Like I'm already thinking like, oh, well, that's because they're these huge corporate, this huge corporate family.
Yeah.
They don't care about anybody. They only care about lining their own pockets and
Right.
rolling around in Bentleys and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe one day they'll have a bad day, turn in their Honda and be like, I want a Bentley, who knows? But it's patrons of the arts are, patrons of the arts.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need capital in order for us to operate for the most part.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Creative Capital's got like a wonderful grant of like 50 to 100.
Yeah, no, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Do you consider your work activist?
No, I don't. And I don't know, like people have tried to put me in that box. I know actual activists that are creators,
Yeah.
And so for me to slap that label on myself as some sort of like sense of pride or whatever, I feel is completely irresponsible, and sort of a dick move to those individuals that I know are out there doing like the real work. Yeah. I'll pop up every once in a while, you know what I mean, and do something. Well, I mean, most of the stuff that I do is rooted in, like, I don't know, it's, I guess being indigenous ancestry is political to begin with, in this day and age, like we are great survivors. So anything that we do in any way that we operate can be viewed as some sort of like idea of resistance or rebellion or whatever, right? But I know people that actually, their boots are constantly on the ground doing the work. So for me to say that I'm an activist or I'm a revolutionary or anything of that nature is completely irresponsible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like, there's certain times when I think like, is what I'm doing enough in terms of like, helping people or helping the world,
mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, I think I had to stop asking that question, and just recognize that like, because being of service is important to me, mm-hmm. like whatever it is that's my capacity for giving and being of service will naturally come out.
Totally.
I don't have to worry about how much that is.
Right.
It is what it is.
And also like I feel, I was thinking about this the other day, as a matter of fact, anybody that puts like their expectations on you, if you're doing the good work, you're doing the good work.
Yeah.
Anybody that puts expectation on you that you're not doing enough or you shouldn't, like, you should probably question, like
right.
how much interaction you have with them,
Yeah.
I don't know, expectations just suck to begin with,
Totally. Setups for resentment.
Totally. Resentment, disappointment,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Heartbreak, whatever,
mm-hmm.
realm of things. But
yeah.
Yeah, I just, I don't know. For me personally, I could place certain expectations on myself.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. Can you think of a piece of art, piece of music, a film, anything like that that really changed either your direction and how you worked, or changed the way you think? Something that just made a big impact on you.
Yeah, of course. Listening to Eric Dolphy's Out to Lunch for the first time completely changed the way I operate.
I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah, he was part of that whole like bebop era. He played with like all the majors. As a matter of fact, like Miles Davis hated him. Like
Wow.
he played with Miles Davis, but I think Miles Davis went on record and said that like his music was unlistenable, or
Whoa.
was like super avant-garde.
Yeah.
But listening to Out to Lunch for the first time completely changed the way that my brain operates in like a creative manner. Like that's usually, it's either that album or Love Supreme by John Coltrane that I listen to first as soon as I start getting into like my thing, or like some Alice Coltrane work, you know. But it typically tends to be those musicians from that era that have completely altered and changed the way that I operate creatively. Yeah.
What was he doing that stood out from some of the other musicians?
Oh, you should just listen to it.
Yeah.
It's completely. I feel like it encapsulates like the feeling. I mean, not that I was there, but like music that encapsulates that whole era of like the Black experience and dealing with all the hardship and all the chaotic energy and everything that came into it. It's I don't know. It's just you just have to listen to it. And I'll listen to that album on repeat. Like for a whole day. Wow. Just in the studio creating. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's yeah.
I'll have to check that
so
out.
And as far as like visual arts are concerned, a lot of like the cultural items from Hawaii or the South Pacific in general, obviously. Well, I mean, maybe not obviously. But also, you know, like the people that I sought out as mentors, they had a massive impact and influence on me. Obviously, I mean, or I wouldn't have sought them out as mentors.
Yeah, right.
And like the way that people approach things like prayer or chant, you know, all of those things. I mean, I view like jazz or bebop or any of those things as like prayer or chant or, you know, meditation. Like I just feel like all the energy that was put into those compositions. I don't know. It's, I mean, like, I think like Kamasi Washington and, you know, what's his name? Ryan Porter and, you know, that whole squad of individuals, Joseph Lamberg, and they're all doing like super interesting things with like what we'd consider to be avant-garde jazz or whatever. And they're capturing like the feeling of today and putting it out there. And I feel like a similar way that those individuals were back in the day.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, it feels devotional.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. I saw Kamasi when he was here, and it was just like, it was like going to church.
Yeah.
I was just like, whoa.
I saw Kamasi in, where is it? Saratoga? At this like winery with my then partner. And like, I couldn't stop weeping. Yeah, it was intense. It was like beautifully intense, like being hit from all angles and like every emotion, you know, like it almost felt like simultaneously, like there was the individual that was on keys and like he would play some awkward lick and then he had two drummers on stage. Did he have two drummers with him when he was here?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, like the way that sonically how like everything was just hitting my body, you know, it was intense.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I missed him at Meow Wolf, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah. So you have, so we're talking about doing a show at Echuamano in opening at the end of July, running through August. Do you have anything coming up that you want to plug?
Well, I currently I'm part of a group exhibition in Paris at Open Space Gallery. And then I'm doing some like sort of ephemeral installation works right now, like 2 6-foot by 4-foot wide panel 3 for an exhibition in Rochester, New York at RIT, which is curated by the good folks and extended family at Wall Therapy, which
Cool.
is like a community-based mural organization.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which Nani Chacon from Albuquerque, from New Mexico, was just out there. She painted something recently. So there's that. Couple of commissions here and there, and then I'm hoping that I get this SAR residency.
That's a School of Advanced Research?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I hope I get that. I know that there's it's highly competitive. I don't take rejection well.
Right.
So there's that, but I'm basically developing like other things for more earth related works as well. So when I'm not in the studio, I'm trying to figure out how to work with certain regional fibers to do things that, I find interesting and pay respects and tribute to the land. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then, so if anybody wants to look at your work, where can they see it online?
Well, unfortunately, right now my website is down.
Uh-huh.
Humans are complicated, but they can find me on Instagram, and if you need to reach out to me, Instagram is probably the best way to reach me. I'm sort of addicted to social media, like most humans these days.
Uh-huh. Is that just Ian Kuali'i?
Ian Kuali'i. That's IANKUALII. I think I'm the only Ian Kuali'i on the planet currently.
Ooh.
Maybe, possibly,
Nice.
unique. I don't know, something. You can reach me on Instagram, and I guess give me a follow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not that you don't already follow me, but
Yeah.
anybody listening, if they want to follow,
Yeah.
get me up to. I fluctuate between like almost hitting 6,000 followers to like just below like right before like 50. Going back.
What
into
a funny
58.
thing, huh?
It's so bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's mainly like bots from like Russia.
They love your work.
They love my work. The bots from Russia like love my work.
Nice.
That's pretty much about it. I mean, there's a sort of a top secret collaborative thing. It's not, I guess, not top secret. Some people know about it, but I can't really talk about it too much in detail on this. But a collaboration with Chinupa Hanska Luger that we've been sort of going back and forth, about.
So when it does become public, will you post about that on Instagram?
I will, definitely.
Cool. So we'll find out.
It's just basically I have to, it's I have to get myself into all of that weird administrative stuff.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't like to do the whole budget proposal thing, but I agreed that I would do the budget proposal.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
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 Cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this, Ian.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Of course.
Yep.
Can I get a round 2 on espresso?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.